There is a specific type of person who can stand in the middle of a loud, crowded living room, holding a lukewarm Topo Chico, surrounded by people laughing and trading stories, and feel completely, fundamentally invisible. Not the anxious wallflower staring at their phone in the corner. Not the arrogant snob secretly judging the room. I am talking about someone who is perfectly capable of being charming, who knows exactly how to smile and nod on cue, but who feels like they are watching the entire party through a pane of thick, soundproof glass. If you know exactly what that glass feels like, you probably spent your entire life thinking something was wrong with you. You were likely told you need to put yourself out there more, smile more, stop being so intense. But clinical psychologists at institutions like Harvard and Stanford have a completely different explanation for what you are experiencing. You are not broken. You possess a neurocognitive profile built for high-fidelity connection in a world that is obsessed with low-resolution small talk. To really understand this, we have to look back at how you were shaped. Let us rewind to the year 2004. You are sitting in the dark glow of a heavy CRT computer monitor, agonizing over a single aim away message. You weren't just typing a Jimmy Eat World lyric. You were broadcasting a highly specific frequency, hoping that out of the 50 people on your buddy list, just one person would understand the exact emotional subtext you were trying to convey. Even back then, when we were paying 10 cents a message on silver Motorola Razr flip phones just to say, hey, you found surface-level chatter completely exhausting. You didn't want a massive group of acquaintances to go to the mall with. You wanted one person who actually understood how your mind worked. You have always been wired for depth, and science has finally caught up to why. The first invisible force dictating your social life is a phenomenon called deep processing. Think about the last time you received a 2-word text message that simply said, "Sounds good." You probably analyzed the lack of an exclamation point for 45 minutes. If you have ever rehearsed your order in your head 5 times before reaching the drive-through speaker, or replayed a casual hallway conversation from 3 days ago, because you noticed a tiny shift in someone's tone, you know exactly what I mean. Your brain isn't broken, it is busy. Neurological imaging shows that individuals with this trait exhibit hyperconnectivity in the precuneus, a region of the brain involved in episodic memory and visuospatial processing. Here is what that actually means in plain English. Your brain is a supercomputer running 10 heavy background applications at once. While the person across from you is just making casual small talk about the weather, you are playing 3-dimensional social chess. You are reading micro-expressions, analyzing pitch, cataloging their body language, and predicting the emotional outcome of the conversation 3 moves ahead. It is utterly exhausting. But here is the reframe you need to hear. You are not overthinking your life. Your deep processing simply refuses to accept surface-level input, which naturally makes shallow friendships feel like a massive waste of energy. This brings us to the second psychological reality, which explains why you would honestly rather sit alone in your car in a parking lot than sit at a table with 10 people you barely know. It comes down to the science of relationship quantity versus quality. Society loves to champion the extrovert who walks into a room and leaves with 5 new phone numbers. But the Harvard study of adult development, which tracked human happiness over an astonishing 75 years, proved that the raw number of your friendships has absolutely zero correlation with your long-term psychological well-being. The only metric that actually moved the needle was the depth of those bonds. Communication researcher Jeffrey Hall at the University of Kansas actually quantified exactly what that depth requires. He found that it takes roughly 200 hours of intentional, quality time to transition someone from an acquaintance to a close friend. 200 hours. When you look at your phone and realize you only have 2 people you can call at 2 a.m., You are not failing at friendship. You simply refuse to hand out the title of friend after one iced coffee and a few Instagram DMs. You intuitively understand the biological cost of those 200 hours. You are not antisocial. You are fiercely selective. But why do those 200 hours feel so much heavier for you than they do for the person next to you? That brings us to the third piece of the puzzle. Dr. Elaine Aron's groundbreaking clinical research identified a trait shared by roughly 20% of the population called sensory processing sensitivity. Functional MRI scans show that highly sensitive people have significantly more activity and blood flow in the insula, the part of the brain responsible for empathy and deep emotional awareness. Here is what that translates to in your daily life. While everyone else is walking through the world in standard definition, you are trapped in an ultra-high definition emotional theater. You are an emotional antenna. You pick up on the subtle, unspoken tension between two people across the room that nobody else notices. You absorb the anxiety of the person sitting next to you on the train, and here is the secret about this trait that nobody ever talks about. This hyper-awareness is exactly what kept the human species alive. During our evolutionary history, the tribes that survived were the ones who had a few highly attuned members who noticed the subtle rustling in the bushes or the sudden drop in temperature before anyone else did. The oblivious ones got eaten. So no, you are not too sensitive. You are highly attuned. You are carrying a genetic gift that most people would immediately crumble under. But carrying that antenna means you require exponentially more recovery time in quiet, dark rooms just to reset your nervous system, which explains the fourth trait. It is the one that confuses your family and your peers the most. It is the psychology of emotional self-sufficiency. Dr. Emma Seppel's work at Stanford highlights a specific type of autonomic emotional regulation where individuals generate their own baseline of psychological safety. Here is what that means in plain English. You do not need external validation to survive. You are not waiting for someone to text you back so you can feel worthy. You do not collect superficial acquaintances just to distract yourself from the quiet of your own mind. In a modern culture overflowing with people who completely fall apart the moment they have to spend a Friday night alone, your ability to sit in silence is rare. It is incredibly valuable. But it also makes you painfully hard to read. People project their own insecurities onto your silence. They assume you are cold, or arrogant, or distant. But you're not cold. You're not distant. You're just whole. You are simply waiting for someone who actually adds to the peace of your life, rather than someone who just disrupts it. Now, we have to talk about the fifth trait, because this one is not about how your brain is genetically wired. It is about what your environment taught you. It is about trust wounds. Somewhere along the line, you learned that deep connection was inherently dangerous. Maybe it was a parent who was physically in the house but completely emotionally vacant. Maybe it was a childhood best friend who dropped you the second they found a more popular crowd. Your brain, functioning exactly as it was designed to, took detailed notes. A massive 2019 meta-analysis on adult attachment styles confirmed that inconsistent emotional safety in our early years fundamentally alters how we evaluate risk in future relationships. Your nervous system literally rewired itself to protect you. It built a sophisticated security system to monitor for red flags, to test people, to keep everyone at arm's length until they proved they weren't going to suddenly disappear. I need you to hear me clearly on this. That is not damage, that is data. Your walls aren't paranoia, they're pattern recognition. You are not stubbornly refusing to let people in. You are simply refusing to let the wrong people in easily. You earned that discernment the absolute hard way. If you have that one friend who disappears for 3 weeks because they are completely overwhelmed, but who will immediately show up at your door when your life is falling apart. Send them this video. It explains everything about how they operate. But I promise to tell you the truth today, which means we have to look directly at the dark side of this reality. Because there is a very fine, very dangerous line between protecting your energy and actively sabotaging your own joy. When you are deeply analytical, highly sensitive, and carrying old trust wounds, it is incredibly easy to weaponize your self-sufficiency. You build a beautiful, impenetrable fortress to keep out the chaotic, surface-level noise of the world. But if you aren't careful, you eventually realize you forgot to build a door. You convince yourself that you just prefer being alone, when in reality, you are terrified of the vulnerability that a genuine 200-hour friendship requires. You start rejecting people before they get the chance to reject you. That is the shadow side of being wired for depth. There is a profound difference between choosing solitude because it fills your cup and hiding in isolation because connection feels too unpredictable. One is peace. The other is a prison you built yourself, and you are holding the only key. So you have to be radically honest with yourself tonight. Are you actually protecting your peace, or are you just avoiding the risk of being seen? If you made it this far, if any of this made you feel like someone finally reached into your brain and turned on the lights, I want you to remember the glass from the beginning of this video. That thick, soundproof glass you feel between yourself and the rest of the world isn't a permanent fixture. It is just a filter. It keeps the noise out so you can focus on the signals that actually matter. You are not antisocial. You are not too intense. You are not structurally broken. You are a high-fidelity connector, living in a low-resolution world. You don't have to change your wiring. You don't have to force yourself to enjoy small talk. You just have to hold out for the people who are willing to put in the 200 hours. The people who speak your exact frequency. They are out there, and they are looking for you too. If this video finally gave a name to what you have been carrying, hit subscribe. I build psychology content exactly like this, every single day for people wired just like us.